Hi and welcome back to this video. So this is all about beans and legumes, a requested video from quite a few of my viewers. So I'm going to take 3 different beans. I'm going to show you 3 different cooking methods. I'm also going to talk about the benefits of beans and why they are just so brilliant for us to have in our diet, and then give some tips on digestion, because that is a big topic and it's a big issue for very many people who want to include them more into their diet, but they are struggling and it makes them feel uncomfortable. So I'm going to cover all of that in this video. Stay tuned to the very end. I will give you my tips on how it worked for me personally, because I definitely didn't eat beans as a child. I didn't have them as a part of my diet until an adult, so therefore it was a transition for me as well. So let's jump into the video and I will show you the beans and how I cooked them. Okay, so I've got mung beans here. I've got some pinto beans and chickpeas as well. Obviously these are all dry at the moment, and this sort of shows you the size of the beans before they've been soaked at all and they're completely dry. So the first thing I'm going to do is soak the beans overnight. You can soak them for less time than that. I'm sure it would be absolutely fine, but I like to do mine overnight so they're really well soaked. If you're going to cook them in the pressure cooker, lots of people say you don't even need to soak them. But if we are helping with the digestion of the beans, I would recommend always soaking them regardless of the cooking method. I've weighed out 100 grams of each of the 3 beans. Always soak your beans in glass or ceramic. Don't use plastics. It's just better that way. And then we're just going to cover them all with lots of water. Now I'll just cover them over and leave them till tomorrow. So 24 hours later, you can see that they've really absorbed the water, they've swollen up, and they are now ready to be rinsed. So take them all and give them a really nice rinse in some fresh water. And you can see the size difference there. So with the mung beans, I am going to make a mung bean soup, and then with the chickpeas and the pintos, I'm just going to cook those in 2 different ways. So I'll do the pintos in the pressure cooker and I'll do the chickpeas on the stove, just to show you 3 different ways that you can cook your dried beans and have them ready to eat. Let's put the pinto beans into the pressure cooker, and I'm just going to add enough water to not even cover them really, because I don't want them to have too much water. So sort of half cover them. I always like to season the water, so I'm just going to add a little bit of bouillon stock, a little bit of onion powder, a little bit of garlic powder. I'm not putting loads in, just a little bit. There's not a lot of beans here. Into the pressure cooker, and I cook these on high pressure for 15 minutes. I put the chickpeas onto the stovetop and I just covered them again with lots more fresh water, probably about 3 parts to 1 in terms of beans to water. And I seasoned again with bouillon, with onion and garlic. Bring that up to the boil and then reduce to a simmer. If you find the water's getting low, obviously just top that up. I cooked those for 40 minutes. To make the soup, I added celery, onion, white and red, and garlic to a pan. I started water sauteing that, and then I added in my soaked mung beans. I added 450 ml of stock, a can of chopped tomatoes, a small green and a small red bell pepper, half a teaspoon of turmeric and half a teaspoon of chili flakes. And then I cooked this for about 30 minutes. And I kept it covered. So as you can see, just 30 minutes later, you've got a delicious, thick, really flavourful soup, and that made me 3 portions. The chickpeas were done again after I say about 40 minutes, and they were ready to be drained. I let the pressure release naturally, and then I opened up my pressure cooker, and the pinto beans were perfectly cooked as well, ready to go into a meal. And I store my beans in glass rather than plastic. So we've now seen just how easy it can be to cook beans, and of course I've just shown you 3 here, but there are many different types of beans, and although the cooking times might vary slightly, It really is as easy as that, and it will be the same for pretty much all beans. Now, when you're cooking things like lentils, some of, the whole lentils might take way longer than, say, the split lentils. And then if you get something like the red lentils, which are the really tiny ones, you can cook them in 6 minutes from dry. So it really is worth having these dry products in your pantry. So why are beans so important, and why do so many health professionals say to us that we should have these in our diet? And it's because of their high nutrient density. They are so good for us. They are powerhouses within the vegan and vegetarian diet, that's for sure. It's the properties that these little legumes hold. They are high in protein, they are high in iron, they contain B vitamins, calcium, manganese, they contain folate, and it's having that water-soluble fibre in there as well. They're really good for tackling things like high cholesterol. They keep us full for longer because of that high fibre content. And there is really nothing bad about having beans in your diet. And research has shown us with things like the Blue Zone study, I'll link it down below, that the longest living populations on planet Earth generally all had beans in their diet, or have beans in their diet. There are studies that have looked at where longevity with good health is occurring naturally, and looking at what are these people eating. And of course, it's no surprise they're not having fast food and high fatty diets and all of this. They are eating a more plant-based diet. And one of the very common denominators was this legumes, beans in the diet. It is just such an important part of being healthy. However, we know that they can be very tricky to digest. I had this problem as well, and I tackled it. So here are a few tips that I have learned through reading and personal experimentation that I know will help you. And the very first tip is to start really slow. Really slow. And I think people don't realize quite how slow, if you're having a big problem, how slow, you should start, but how consistently you should incorporate them into your diet. And it literally can start with a teaspoon of beans. Of course, this all depends on how intolerant you are to them, or how uncomfortable you feel when you eat them, what your symptoms are. Is it a stomach ache? Is it the bloating? Is it the gas? There are some people get all of the symptoms, some people just get some. But starting really slow, but doing this consistency is the best way to go, because the reason that we're struggling to digest them is because we haven't got the right enzyme level that is breaking down the oligosaccharides that are the predominant problem. That's, these are the things that we want in our diet, but they are the things that without the enzymes in our stomach to tackle them and digest them, these are the problems. And we want to build up that microbiome so that this particular enzyme has a chance and is given a chance to multiply. And once you have that sort of biome going on, you will find digestion far easier. Now, these enzymes, your microbiome, with certain elements of your microbiome can change very quickly. Others are going to take time. That's what we've got to do. We've got to do this in a step-by-step consistent method. And that will mean just having a little spoon, maybe twice a week to start with, building up to 3 times a week. And rather than trying to increase the portion size, increase the consistency first, and then start to increase the portion size. So you're just going to add, even if it is a teaspoon of beans into a salad or a soup or a stew, just as a topping to something you're eating. Start like that, do that twice a week, then do that 3 times a week, and then start to increase it to 2 teaspoons, 3 teaspoons, and you will build your way up to having a portion. That is the number one tip. And it really is, I think, probably going to help almost anybody to be able to digest them, because you're giving your body that chance to build up this enzyme, this new microbiome that finds digesting and managing these legumes easy. Tip number 2 is to really cook your beans thoroughly, almost to a paste, if that's what's necessary. And maybe have your beans as a paste, a bit like you would have hummus. So overcooking the beans, and you can do that even if you're buying them in cans and jars and packets, pre-cooked foods. Cook them again, because quite often they might be still quite al dente when they're coming out of the tins. So you can cook them again throw them into your saucepan or a microwave, cook them again. Now, if you're doing this from dry, which is kind of what this video is implying is a great idea to do, then it's helpful because you can cook the right amount that you want. You know, if you are only having 2 teaspoons a week, you might not want to open a can or a jar, whatever is available in your country. You might not want to open one every week, even though they're generally not too expensive. You can just cook what you want, you know, and you can have them dry and you're not producing food waste. But just making sure that you are cooking to the point where, you know, they are almost a paste, if not a paste. That's going to really help to break down. And again, we're just concentrating on building up that changing microbiome and having these new enzymes available to us. Okay, tip number 3, which probably should have been tip number 2 really sequentially, is to soak the beans overnight before you're going to cook them. As you saw in my video, I always do this, and this really does aid in digestion and speeds up the cooking time. And the soaking of them does help to release those oligosaccharides, which is one of the reasons why they are tricky to digest. So always soak your beans. You can do them for 48 hours even. You don't have to just do it for 24 hours. And if you're going to do it for 48 hours, rinse them rinse them once and change that water. So 24 hours later, rinse them and then change the water for nice fresh water and soak them for another 24 hours. I know that that will also help to, you'll see them expand in size. They're going to be absorbing more water. It's going to help with the cooking time and releasing those oligosaccharides. Tip number 4 is if you are using canned beans and pre-packaged, pre-cooked beans, is to rinse them really thoroughly before you're going to cook them again, if you are. So rinsing them really does help to get rid of a lot of the juice and the water that they've obviously been soaking in. And again, it will help with digestion as well. So don't cook them in the water that they arrived in the tin. Tip number 5 is to not salt the water that you're cooking your beans in. Apparently salting the water obviously will affect taste, but apparently it does speed up cooking, but it does reduce the digestibility of the beans. So I'm not exactly sure of the science behind that, but just don't salt the water. Cook them in the plain water like I showed you with some garlic or some stock or something like that. Any herbs and spices is good. You could put curry leaves in there, whatever you like really, but not salt in the cooking process. Tip number 6 is to always chew your food really well, like really well. I have to be very conscious of this, and I expect I'm not alone, especially when, you know, you might be talking with someone else or watching something or being a bit distracted when you're eating, is I don't think about how much I'm chewing my food. But chewing is the first stage of digestion. We all know that. So chewing your beans really well, being conscious when you're eating, is going to help you with the digestion also. Okay, I've lost count, but I think I'm on tip number 7. This one, I'm not sure again on the science behind it, but apparently having some spices in with the meal that you are consuming, you know, the beans with, can aid in the digestion process as well. If we think about beans and legumes, they quite often are in kind of curried things or spiced foods. And this apparently is a real thing. It does actually help us to digest our foods. So adding some spices in there, cooking it in with that stew, that curry, that soup, is a great way to help with the digestion. My final tip is kind of 2 parts really. The first part is don't give up. Please don't give up. I think we're all very aware that our bodies are constantly changing, to maybe in ways we like, maybe in ways we don't like, but our bodies do constantly change as we grow, and we can change what's going on internally through our diet. We know this. This is not news, of course. So don't give up, because you can change that microbiome in your body, and what you're going to eat will just absolutely affect what your body can cope with. So don't give up. Going from a standard diet to a vegan diet for very many people will be a transition that will be very noticeable in your bodily functions and the way it's reacting. And it really does depend if you're a kind of overnight person, or if you're like, I'm going to take my time and introduce and eliminate things step by step in a process. So I know people that have done it both ways, with and without success. And everybody that I know well enough to have a personal conversation with has told me that, you know, they really did notice changes in their body going to a plant-based diet. But don't give up, because beans can become a part of your diet and you will be able to change your microbiome. And secondly, this is a personal belief of mine, is that we have to believe that we can change our diet and our lifestyle. If we don't really truly believe that we can change our habits and that our bodies can change and adapt, then I don't think that's really sending the right signals of love and care to ourselves. So believe as well, believe that you can do this, because I believe you can, so believe in yourself as well. So to wrap this video up, I just wanted to give a little bit of my own personal experience. Like I said, I definitely didn't grow up eating beans or a plant-based diet, very far from it. And I very vividly remember the transition period of when I wanted to start eating lots of legumes and beans, all of that kind of lentil family. And I did what most people probably do and just had a big meal with loads of it in there, and then thought, oh my goodness, what have I done? I had the stomach ache, I had the cramps, I had incredible bloating. I will not forget that, because it was the only time I felt truly pregnant without being pregnant. I had a massive tummy. I took photos of it. I was so impressed by how huge it was. Not in a good way, but yes, I know those symptoms. I definitely know them, and I know how they feel. And I basically didn't give up. Obviously, now I could eat a can of beans without any effect at all. I would not feel anything different in my body. And the reason and the procedure I went through was I just completely reduced down that portion size, and I had it regularly, and I just didn't give up. And for me, I wanted to get there quite quickly. I really didn't want these symptoms. So I just was very consistent. Every 2 or 3 days, I would have some again. And I tried different beans and I tried different legumes, and I just didn't give up. And I got there. It did take, I would say it did take a few months. So this might not happen for you in, a week or 2 weeks. It did take a couple of months, but it became easier constantly. So I could feel the progress happening. And now I know, I didn't even really know back then, but now I know about the fact that it was my microbiome completely altering so that I could manage these foods. Now I know that was what I was going through. It totally makes sense, because as it was changing, I was getting less of the symptoms. So those are my tips and my advice, my personal experience. And if you've got children, I would really recommend starting to slide those beans and legumes into their diet at a young age, because their bodies are going to just take on what you give them, make those adaptations, and be able to manage things as they grow older. So you can hide beans in lots of ways if kids are funny about that. Give them things like hummus instead of butter, and there's lots of different tricks you can do, but you can puree them and slide them into sauces and so on. There's lots of ways that you can do it, and I really recommend giving your kids beans and legumes, lentils and things, because they're just so good for them. I will see you guys next week. Thanks for watching. Bye.